Spell for me your name.
Full name?
Yeah.
Robert, R-O-B-E-R-T,
Okay.
C-O-W-D-E-L-L, Cowdell.
C-O-W-D-E-L-L.
Right.
Okay. And what year did you graduate?
1948.
Okay. Okay, well, tell me, what was it like going, just living in this area when you were growing up?
In Copperton itself, it was great. We more or less was kind of confined here in Copperton. We didn't have a lot of transportation, and we just, the thing I look at it as a kid was we had a ballpark, which we had playground with. B.J. Stevens was the coach, and he took us all up there. And they called it the Eskimo Pie League at one time, and we used to play in the old park over across the street from the school here on the south side where they had the old ballpark. And we had a lot of fun. We was confined to Copperton. The only way out was either thumb or catch a bus, and we didn't have the money to catch the bus. But it was a great life to live in Copperton with all the things we had to do, the great park we had over there to play in, and nobody ever had to lock their doors, and it was just like family, all one big family. And I enjoyed it thoroughly from day one until the time I left. It was great.
What was, give me your take on the history of the area and, why is this here and what was going on in town when you were here?
Well, the thing that was going on in town when I was here was, it was during the war years, and we had new homes being built at the time in the upper part of Copperton on the west side, and they tore the old ballpark down and built the new ballpark up here, and I think that was one of the greatest things that ever happened in Copperton. Then we had down here, we had a little store, confectionery. It was Vaughn Christensen's confectionery, and I think that's where 95% of the kids hung out. And I think the only thing they hung out there for, they might got a free popsicle or whatever. But the history of Copperton, I watched it grow. I watched the people grow, the new homes grow. I moved to Copperton in 1930 when I was 2 years old, and from that day on, all I can say, it was just a wonderful place to live, and there was a lot of construction going on at the time. And like I say, the war broke out in 1941, and 1945, then I went in the service then. But after that, I come back and graduated with class of 48. I should have graduated in 1946. But it was a great time growing up. It was neat. I loved the town of Copperton, along with Bingham, Alumni, Copperton, Copperfield, and so forth.
What was it like going to school here in high school?
Well, it was great because, we had many, many different nationalities here. I think every nationality upon the earth was at Bingham, and it didn't make any difference what you was and what religion you was. It was all one big happy family, and it was just a great thing. You run the halls with one another, and you grew up with one another, and whatever nationality you was, you just blended in. And I enjoyed it. One big reason I enjoyed it because everybody was friendly, and everybody was more like a brother and a sister. We didn't have big fights or anything like that. And like I say, we went in and out of each other's house as we would go to Bingham. I remember the old Moretti boarding house was open to the public. If you was hungry, all you had to go is you had a bowl of soup, and it was just great. I think that the big thing in growing up in Copperton and things like that was the school teachers such as Bailey Stevens. He was my friend, exceptionally good friend. He's the one that brought me through, and it was just great. We just had to walk across the tracks and up the other side of the hill, and we was over in hunting grounds with our shotguns as kids, but he would go with us. And a lot of times we'd be sloughing school and be over there and we'd run into him. And he'd ask us what we was doing there, and I'd ask him what he was doing there. And he'd say, looking for you. But them the kind of things that you really enjoyed, and there was a lot of fun in it. I just enjoyed it thoroughly.
What was daily school life like? What were some of the activities that you did?
Well, school life was great. I had one subject that I was grateful for, and that was artwork with Paul Cuny. I think it was my best subject. And each class that I'd go to, we had a lot of good teachers. They were great. But James Bingham in biology, he was one of the greatest teachers that you could ever ask for. And you take Mr. Bailey, he'd get on me many times because he was my math teacher, and I'd do artwork in his class, and he'd tell me to go on down to Cuny's class. That's where I belonged. But it was, you know, they never really got upset with you because they were wonderful people. We'd run the halls, and they had the ramps here. You know, they didn't have stairways, and we made raceways out of them. A lot of times we'd roller skate down them, but a lot of times we wouldn't too. But it was just great because it didn't make any difference where you was in the school. You was looked after, and it was good. I liked over in shops with Mr. House Connect, who they called boss, you know, and he was the boss. I recall one time that I was on the way over to woodwork, going up to Penrod's shop. He was the woodwork teacher, and I made one mistake. I walked into auto mechanics, and I called this friend of mine to come over, and he told me he couldn't go out of class, you know. So I'm sitting there, and I was headed up the ramp to Penrod's, and he told me I couldn't go up. He says, until you explain to me why you wanted Dawn out of the class. And at the time, I told Clinton, I says, you better run. He says, I can't run. He says, I'm off the ground, both feet off the ground. And my feet were off the ground too. He had us both up against the wall. But these are the kind of things that I enjoyed, you know, because they weren't mean, they were just good people trying to teach you to do the right things, and they did do the right things through these teachers.
So you could get a pretty good education?
Very good education through Bingham High School, you bet. The best. When I got out of the service, the biggest percentage of my friends went to school up. They went up to the AC up in Logan. And I went up with them, but I didn't stay. I came back and worked for Kennecott. And I worked there for 41 years. But I became a supervisor in the electrical department. And two of the fellows that graduated from college come back and went to work for me. And like I say, I keep falling back on Bailey Santa Stevens, BJ, because he's the one that told me to use my own imaginations to what I want to do. Don't listen to anybody else. Go the right way. And this is great.
What were some of the traditions that you had here at Bingham High School?
Traditions, and what do you mean?
Any particular activity or event that took place year after year?
Well, we had the Miners Club, and of course I enjoyed watching the Minorette Club. You know, they're the women. But they had the Miners Club and the photography class. They had all this in. I liked sports, and we could go into the gym and play most any time we'd want, you know, as long as we didn't have anything else to do. And Sonny Alsop was always good to us, and excuse me, he would help us along. But I can remember Sonny Alsop was telling a few of the guys that went to school with me, he says, you will not graduate. I know you won't, you know. But they come back and kind of fooled him. They did come back, and in fact, the one guy that he told he didn't think he'd graduate because he was too much of a fool around was Dave Curry. And Dave approached me one day and he says, I've got to go talk to Sonny Alsop. I says, why? And he says, I got to show him this check. And he had a check for $1 million, you know, and he says, I wonder if he went that far. But, you know, it's great because things like that go on. But they did teach us good, and they were great. But The camera club was great, and I was in the band. I played the clarinet, but I didn't play it very long. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Joel P. Jensen, who was the teacher, and it was great. We had a janitor here by the name of Ole Jensen that kept on our tails, you know, and kept us in a straight line. I think he was more on the straight line than most of the teachers because he watched over all of us. But it was a great.
Now, you said you were involved with sports. What sports were you involved with? And
Oh,
what was that like?
I played baseball, and I played baseball with classes 45, 46, and 47, you know, 48. And it was great. We had a wonderful coach like Bailey Santa Stevens. He brought us all the way up from 3, 4, and 5 years old up till we graduated, and then from then on, you know. And hey, it was all you could do. Each summer day, we'd come over here and play for between 5 and 8 hours a day, right up in the new stadium. And he had the patience to take whatever we dished out, and he just taught us real good. I never did. I liked football, but I went into the service before it come time for me to play football. I went into the service at the beginning of 1946, and like I say, when I come back, I graduated with the class 48. But I didn't have really a chance. I love sports, and like I say, B.J. Santa Stevens tried to talk me out of going into the service because he thought I'd do good in sports. And I didn't play much, but I did play a lot of baseball.
How was the school spirit?
Great. Oh, it had a wonderful spirit. I married a girl from went to Jordan, you know. She's from Riverton, and she just told me that there was no school like the spirit of Bingham High School. She just, you know, she goes with me. I've been on the class reunion committee ever since I came back from the service, along with Joyce Miller. I was the president of the sophomore class, and she was the vice president. We've been working together on these class reunions ever since. And my wife says that Bingham High School is just one great big friend. She says it's not like my school. You go and you've got to look for friends. Of course, she had a graduation class about 300 and something. We had, I think, 69. So, you know, it's a little closer, but the tradition and the spirit was just great in Bingham High School. You couldn't find it anyplace else. I don't know where you'd go to find it. It's just a wonderful spirit here.
Any particular events or things that happened while you were attending school that maybe other classmates could relate with? You know, other your fellow students that they remember?
Well, I think the biggest thing that happened to me is when I got elected president of the sophomore class, because, you know, I thought I was far down the ladder from that, you know, and I think that's really where I started coming forth after I got elected president of the sophomore class, and I really enjoyed it after that, because I always thought I took the back door to this fellow and that fellow, but in Bingham you don't do that. I liked that, and I liked the dances that we had over in the gym, and Sonny Alsop would coach us on how dancing and how to do this and how to do that, you know, and it's just a wonderful opportunity of getting together with the rest of the students. And he would make you dance with somebody you didn't want to dance with, you know, but after you got through, it was great. But I think the biggest thing, you know, it was when the classes would get together and go to the football or the basketball games over in the gym. I think that was my highlight, you know, just to sit there and watch the boys play basketball, because we had a lot of good ones. And of course, we never did take a championship while I was in high school, but Sonny was a good man, and he taught us all good. But I liked the different clubs they had, you know, and all that. I never did really have the opportunity to join them. Like I say, I went into the service real young.
What was, you know, let's hit the dances a little bit. Talk a little bit about what dances were like and what social life was like in high school.
Well, we'd dancing, in the days that I was going to school, you had the old jitterbug, and hey, you'd just, we had one fellow by the name of Jimmy Macris that we'd all just sit back and watch him. And he'd go through every motion and movement there was, but he was the best. And we'd have our dances over there in the gym, and we'd had the prom, the junior prom. I didn't get to the senior hop, but Jimmy was always the center of attraction at our dances with his jitterbugging. And he'd do everything there was on the floor. And we had a lot of good dancers here in Bingham, just wonderful dancers that, of course, they all had the opportunity because they had the Gimel Club at Bingham and Carfork, and they'd allow us to go up there and dance. And that's where you learned. But we had a lot of fun with the dances at the gymnasium across here, just great. And we did do a lot of jitterbugging.
Let's see. What do you think is the most unique thing about Bingham High School that people who go here?
Well, I think the thing that I can recall about the most unique thing is I went to school with a fellow by the name of Gray Kenner, who was really a top student, He didn't have to study. He would go home without books and come back with an A. And he ended up, I think he graduated from Harvard, number 3 position. I wouldn't count on that, but I think he did. But things like that, that when you sit back and say, hey, them people come from Bingham High School, and you sit back and think, up there in the canyon where there isn't anything, nobody's ever heard of us, But when it comes out, people has really gone a long ways from Bingham. I can't think of the one lady's name who was pretty high in the government. I think she was had a lot to do with the money of
She was U.S. Treasurer.
U.S. Treasurer, yeah. And
Someone already mentioned her name earlier today.
but people like that don't realize, like Bingham come from a hard mining town, but they're there. And as I look back and see people like that, it really makes me feel good to think that I come out of the same school. But that's pretty unique to me.
Having attended here at this building, and what do you remember most about this building, and if it should ever go away, what's gonna stick in your mind the most? What aspect of it? What little nook or cranny or whatever?
Well, the thing that I'm going to miss most is Mr. Houseknecht's machine shops over there, because it isn't every place you can take your brother's car in and have it fixed, and of course it'd be there all year long. But that's about the best thing that I can think of is the machine shops over there. How coordinated it was with Howard Houseknecht, and how he just threw his weight around to show you that he was the boss, which they called him boss, but a wonderful teacher. And the pranks that we used to pull over there, and he'd straighten us right out, But that would be my most thoughtful part of Bingham High School, was the machine shops, along with the gym over here. I used to sit up in the corner on a little platform that come out and keep score for the basketball games. You had to move them by hand. We didn't have the electric clocks. And that was a thrill to get to do that. But that's another thing that, Sonny says, that'll keep you out of trouble. As long as you're up there, I can watch you, And it really worked. It was great. And I will miss the old gymnasium, and I'll miss the machine shops. I miss the whole school as far as that goes. And all the teachers that was here, it just, each time you walk through it, it kind of builds up your morale to think that you had an opportunity of going to this school. And I don't know what's going to happen to it. I guess they're going to tear it down, but that's kind of a heartbreak too. But I think that, well, every part of it stays with you.
If you were to have any kind of words of wisdom for up-and-coming minors about the high school experience, what would it be?
Well, the younger people coming up, I think that I would let them know how great it was just to be a Binghamite, you know, and to stay in school and make your goal to graduate. Do the things that you're taught to do and do it the right way. Of course, the school is in South Jordan now, and I wasn't happy when they moved to South Jordan, but I think that education is number one in everybody's life. That should be. I failed to do it when I was going to school, and I think that everybody should look forward to an education in college to make sure that they've got the right track. And there's so much going on in this world today. It's just a crazy world. I served a mission for LDS Church and social services on alcohol and drugs, you know, and I went through a lot of these schools and seen a lot of these kids, and it's heartbreaking to see what this will do when it gets a hold of you. But if they can get the right company at the right time, that's the path they're going to take. And I think that each kid should look forward to an education, a good education.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to discuss today? Any other experiences of interest or?
I think I've just about covered everything I could cover.
Okay, you covered everything that we have on the list here. I just want to make sure that you get a chance to say everything that you wanted to.
Well, I just like to let the people know that Copperton has grown into a wonderful community still this day, you know. I don't know many people out there now, but when we were kids, and the old ballpark was over here, I just think that it was the greatest place in the world to live, along with Bingham, Highland Boy, Copperfield, and so forth. Just a wonderful bunch of people. You can't find any people like that in the world. It's that close. But I think that the thing about Bingham High School is the greatest. And I'm just grateful that I was able to graduate from there. And I hope that many people can do the same thing later on at the new school.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Well, I hope it is. I'm not much for...
No, you did fabulous.
All right. Well,
Just give me your full name and and the spelling.
My full name?
Yeah, as you'd want to be identified. Would it be Cal? Or
Cal Crump. Cal.
Cal.
Cal. C-A-L-C-R-U-M-P.
I'm sorry. What was the last?
C-R-U-M-P. Crump.
C-R-U-M-P. And you graduated in 50?
I graduated in 1947.
Okay.
Yeah, you get up as close as you can.
Go ahead and pause the tape for a moment. See that? Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
See, that was the same way with our cheer practices. We, as a teacher, we had, I can visualize this. This was just really a big roar in here when we had come over here and have cheer practice. But we didn't have that when we was a student, so much as we did when we was a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me, what was it like growing up in this area?
Are you on now?
Yeah.
Well, it was something, when I grew up, it was something where we knew everything, knew everybody, and I guess you could say we knew everybody else's business too. There wasn't too many things that we didn't know about the people in the area. I grew up in Lark. It was a mining town, and of course their students in Lark funneled over to here when they were a 7th grade age, and we spent 6 years here at the school. In the middle school and the high school was here. We didn't have to, as far as economics, we were all pretty well the same. We all had the same opportunities. Nobody was trying to outdo anybody else like they do nowadays. And we get along, everybody got along with good. Nationalities, all the different nationalities.
We're gonna have you hold up. Got it. Oh, you did, okay. We just get a lot of noise from outside, so.
Not,
Watching out for you, man,
Cool.
because I care.
All right, thank you. Okay, you're talking about the nationalities?
all the different nationalities that we had here in the canyon. It seemed like we all got along real well. And church-wise, everybody helped. It wasn't no dominant churches. We all helped each other when there was a benefit or something. We supported each other, and so there was just a good feeling among the people here in the areas.
And let's kind of take a step back. Tell me about the history of the area.
You gotta ask him. Now, when you say the history, you're talking about the history here. That's a pretty hard topic.
Okay, that's fine. I was just asking people just to get their different idea. Well, tell me, what was it like when you were growing up here, history-wise? What was going on? What was it like?
Well, my time was spent in athletics. It seems like we spent all our summers over here in a playground type of situation with our old baseball coach, Bailey Santa-Stephen. So we spent all our summers over here in the park playing what you call Little League baseball. And then, of course, that would go in, as we got older, we'd go into American Legion. And over in Lark, my activities were going up in the Cedar Hill and hunting lizards and playing cops and robbers, playing marbles, playing Andy I over, playing in the street. We didn't have too many parks in there, so most of our activities was touch football, softball. We played right in the streets, and so or touch football. Those were the activities that we had in those types of days to keep us busy. And then the other athletic events during the course of the year, of course, there was we had football and basketball, and we were all involved in those types of activities, athletic-wise.
What about school here? What kind of things were you involved with when going to school?
We had the Letterman's Club, and I started out in the band, but that didn't last very long. Other than that, they were very different as far as clubs is concerned. There are not that many at the school. Most of my time was, like I said, has been spent with athletics. That was my full-time thing all the way through the school year.
Randy? Probably won't need to get quite that way.
Yeah,
Okay.
watching it.
What about everyday life? You know, your friends. What did you do when you were going to school? What was it like on a daily basis?
Well, I had several friends from Lark that had the same interests, because we had to do a lot of bumming rides from here back over the Lark because we didn't have transportation. So we had several of my friends that played the same sports, and we was on the road there back and forth. We was close. I mean, what was mine was theirs, and what was theirs was mine. We got along real well. I don't remember any fights or anything like that, but it was fun growing up at those times with those guys.
What do you think you remember most about going to high school here?
Well, the things I remember most is the athletic end of it. During our junior and senior years, we won the state championship in football, and during my senior year, we won the state championship in baseball. And then during my 3 years in American Legion, we were the state champions in American Legion ball. So we had a well-rounded class as far as athletic-wise. And that was as far as the boys was concerned, that was about the only thing that, as far as we had to take part in extracurricular activities. They were all good students. And the girls had their pep club, minorettes, and that was there wasn't too many other activities.
So how was the school spirit? Were people into, sports and stuff?
We had very good school spirit, and I know my parents, every game I played, whether it was Twilla, Magna, Grantsville, or they were always there, and so we had a lot of parent cooperation that the followers. And here at basketball games, this place would always be filled, and there would be the same people here in the same seats for many, many years. So there was good school spirit at that time.
With the schools being as spread out as they were, and I know you guys took a bus, a lot of traveling involved with sports. What was that like, going on the bus rides and going over to Grantsville or?
To take that bus ride to Grantsville and the Twilla seemed like it took hours and hours and hours. Now, not today, it only takes about a half hour, 45 minutes at the most. But when you're on a bus ride with the group of boys as we had there, the team-wise, it was fun. We'd, especially after a victory, of course, there was a lot more singing and joking and playing around. Of course, just like any other time when you lose, well, then of course everything was pretty well quiet and respected that we didn't like that type of situation.
Let's see. How are the teachers here? Yeah, how was it, what are the classes like? What were your teachers? How were they?
We had, the classes were pretty well set. Pretty well the students took the same classes, but I had some of the teachers that I remember and enjoyed was Miss Bear. She was our English teacher, and of course one of the favorite quotations that I always remember is she got mad at some individual. She'd always say, "Now listen here, my little dear Alfonso," and when she went into her act that way, they knew that she meant something. So everybody turned to. And then I had Mr. Bingham, and he always said, "I'm Bingham from Bingham." That's how he was always introduced himself, whether he went back to a convention or not. But he had chemistry, and he was another teacher that you knew where you stood. And when he had assignment, he'd have a little a little basket right there on his desk, and he always went by Navy time, like 0800. And when that class was started, the bell rang, and just as soon as that, he'd have his hand right above the basket, and just as soon as the vibration of that bell was over with, the hand went down. Any assignments that came on top of that hand was worth 50%. And so I'll tell you, there wasn't too many assignments that were on top of that hand. They knew where they stood, and 50% on assignment, there's not too many students that wanted that. And so he got all the assignments, we got the assignments there on time. Another one of my favorite teachers was who we called, it was Howard Houskinick, and his nickname was the Boss. And that's exactly what it stood for. We knew he was the boss. And he had his classes organized in the welding, auto mechanics, and machine shop were all together at one class. And so he really had things organized, and we all knew he was a boss, and that's who we treated him. And I spent a lot of time in the afternoon in those areas under his jurisdiction. And that's something I enjoyed. And that's what I always appreciated, even though I went on to college in education. I always appreciated those vocational classes that I took, and I think they did me a lot of good during my life. Even the type class that I took, and that did me some good when I was even in the service, just knowing how to type. And so I really appreciated those classes that I had from those teachers.
What were some of the traditions that you had here at Bingham?
We always had the blue and white day. That was always before, during the week of a big athletic contest, whether it was basketball or football. And everybody dressed up in their colors, and promoted that, and got the school spirit to a point where we were ready to for the athletic event on that Friday. Another one that I remember was our bee day, where we went up to whitewash the bee up on the mountain, and each grade was assigned part of that bee to have it whitewashed. And the sophomores were assigned the long part of the bee, and the juniors were assigned the top part of the bee, and then the seniors were assigned the bottom part. And of course there was always that competition of trying to get done first and get down to the school, back down to the school first. And so there was a lot of the competition, especially with the seniors, to make sure that they were the first ones down, because that was a traditional thing that the seniors get done first. And that was a fun day, and I don't think there was too many clean students when they got down there. There was pretty well the whitewash all over everybody. So that was a fun time in life.
Anything else?
Not really.
Okay. Pause the tape.
Yeah.
Pages.
Give me a second.
You were going to ask me about PE class?
Mhm.
Speak.
Okay.
My PE classes were always something that I looked forward to every day, even from the 7th grade on up. I know in the 7th and 8th grade especially, we'd always see who was the first one over here to get the newest ball to shoot before class, and how I was the the winner. I would put on my gym clothes between some of my periods, one of my class periods. Then when I come over here, only thing I had to take off was my clothes, and I'd be all ready for gym. And I'd get out and get the ball first, and that was kind of a tradition there. And then in our gym classes too, everybody was dressed. And the main reason for everybody being dressed is that we had a spatting machine. And if there wasn't anybody that was didn't forget their clothes or something like that, we'd just have two lines, and that person would bend over and then go down through that line, and they'd get spatted on the bottom. Now, as you can see, we probably have the ACLU on us if they knew something like that existed today. But that was one of the things that Mr. Alsop, who was our instructor, everybody was dressed, and that was one thing I remember.
Now, after going here as a student and knowing that you're coming back as a teacher, what kind of feelings did you have knowing that you're going to be teaching at the school that you spent so much time at growing up?
When I came back as a teacher, I tried to keep the same types of traditions going. Even coming over here in the gym, I had the same types of rules. And as I started out, we still had the spatting machine was still in effect, and we had a lot of traditions as far as what we did in gym classes. We had one game called Russian basketball, and that was a game where we had a lot of surplus boxing gloves, and they kids would put one glove on the right or left hand and dribble the basketball. They had the teams, and as long as you had the ball, they could come and hit you. And that was one of the fun things, and I bet you a lot of kids will remember down through the years of the Russian basketball.
I bet that teaches you to pass, doesn't it?
Probably the ACLU would be on our case there too.
Well, let's get into your teaching years. And what was it like teaching here?
I really enjoyed the teaching end of it. I was also teaching the PE classes, the physical education, but I was also teaching some consumers math. I had some history classes when I first started, so I had a bunch of classes that were interesting, and it made it interesting all through the day. Then as I went along, of course, as the school got bigger, and then I was spending most of my time over here teaching physical education and coaching. I was also in driver's ed. There was an incident there that would be, it was a fun situation. Usually on my last day of driver ed with 3 students, we would go into the city, Salt Lake City, and we go up to the state capitol. And on the one side of the state capitol there was a big hill. And usually the one that I figured had the most confidence, or thought they had the most confidence in their driving, when we got halfway up this hill, I would usually put the foot on the brake and turn the key off. And this was a traumatic experience for a person that was there sitting on the hill and the car not running. And then I would tell them that usually to get as much pressure on as possible, there was somebody behind us, we better get going, and they try to turn the key on, and their hand usually got rigor mortis in it, and it was hard to coordinate the brake and the accelerator. And it was just, quite an experience. And I know through the years, the students are always, meet students in that type of situation, they always remind me about that. I had, of course, was wrestling coach for several years. Delmar Schick started it, and then when he went to help with the basketball, I picked it up. And we had a wrestler that was a state champion, and I remember him. He stands out the best. His name was Blaine Overson, but his mother was quite an enthusiastic spectator. And when we had our wrestling meets over here, up in the stands, you'd look over there and you wouldn't see anybody in front of her because she would be halfway up. And just as soon as the match started, here she come out of the stand and come down there almost on the mat, beating the mat, encouraging her son on, and it was quite a situation there.
Speaking of that, I know wrestling matches can be pretty tense events. What was it like here?
They were the wrestling matches would really. We had a lot of rivalry with Jordan and Hillcrest, and when those schools started up, and also Tooele and Cypress. I think as time went on, we had our identity just as well as basketball. It took for a few years before some of the wrestlers felt they were just as good as basketball players, because they were the show as far as the school was concerned. But when we had a wrestling match, we started with a few people, and then over the years we had a good sizable group there watching us. And they would get down to, some of them, when you get down to the heavyweight match and the score was tied, or it was 2 points behind, he couldn't be pinned, and even if he wasn't pinned, we still win, and everybody knew that. And people were quite knowledgeable of how wrestling was scored and what you needed as far as the win, and that was real fun as far as the coaching end of it.
How were your students when you were teaching here? How do you look back on them?
The students were good. They respected you a lot more so than what they do nowadays. What I said usually, and that was the law, and they respected you for that. I know even in our football, sophomore football, there was an instance there we had a drill, what we called the separator. And what it actually does is separate the boys from the men. And it was a tackling drill, and when they got through with it, they knew that who was the football players and who weren't the football players. Let's put it that way. And then there was another thing that stands out too, that we had kind of a tradition with the sophomore football team, is what we call the molehill. And the molehill was up behind the stadium, and if we lost a football game, that's what they expected they'd have to do the next Monday, would be to run that molehill. And that's with full gear, the helmets and the shoulder pads and everything, and go up that hill and then back down. And that was something they didn't cherish too much. So I'd have to say we were more on the winning side than the losing side. Another thing with football, it came down to a point when we first started was real interesting, was kids when they didn't have little league football like they do now. And our helmets didn't have face masks on either. And at least half dozen of the kids, when they first put their uniforms on for the first time, they come out and their helmets would even be on backwards. And their shoulder looked like them, and their shoulder pads would even be on backwards. So it was that was quite something as far as football was concerned. I remember those types of things.
Anything different between when you went to high school and when you taught? How were students different? How was the experience different, do you think, going to high school at Bingham?
Students were really different. When I first started, students expected to be disciplined. I mean, if I went over and grabbed one of the kids' shoulders when I first started, that meant something. just the pressure of that hand on the shoulder meant that it wasn't a good situation, that you better knock it off. My latter days, when I was out of the classroom, discipline, there wasn't what you say, you couldn't do that type of discipline. And kids, of course, the first thing that they look at you with that eagle eye and say, don't touch me. And if you do touch me, in other words, I'll get my parents and we'll sue. That's a big difference between the students in my early years and what they were in the later years. But those two type of students earlier, they expected to be disciplined.
Let's see. Having attended this building, taught in this building, and now that this building is not going to be used for that purpose anymore, what area do you think you're going to miss most? When someone mentions the old Bingham High School, what's the first part of it that comes to mind?
Well, the things I remember, will remember about this building, now that it's closed down, of course, will be the gym. I have hopes that the gym will be able to be saved, and that we might be able to have some kind of recreation here for the community. But I spent most of my time here in the gym and in the wrestling area, so that would be the areas that I would miss the most, and hopefully that they would still be here, even if the building was tore down, they could still save the gymnasium. Of course, the shops, I spent a lot of time over in the shops, in the shop area too, but I don't know what's going to happen there.
What do you think, what's the most unique thing about a Bingham High School student? What makes them unique?
Well, I think the one thing that stands out that makes a Bingham High School student unique is that they're easy to get along with. I think that they mix with other students better. Their traditions, they want to keep the traditions alive that are even traditions that we had years ago. They still want to keep those traditions alive.
So a lot of pride.
Mm-hmm. I think school pride is the main thing that any school is a big plus. And I think that that's what Bingham has always been able to maintain, is that school pride, because even though I've been out of education for several years now, I attend a lot of the athletic events and a lot of the music events and things like that, and I can still see that pride and still there. So hopefully over the years they can still keep them.
Okay. I think that's going to cover it. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention?
I don't know. We covered quite a bit.
Well, I taught up here for a lot of years.
How many?
25.
25 years. That's a long time. So do you miss it?
I do. I don't miss coming to work.
Well, who does?
But I miss the association, all the activities, and
Okay, Dorothy, give me the correct spelling of your name.
Dorothy Peterson. I always went by Dorothy C. Peterson,
Okay.
but Peterson.
And what years did you teach here?
I taught in 1958, 59, And I came back and taught through 1964 through 1987.
And what did you teach?
A little bit of everything. Physical education,
I mean, would that probably be your
physical
most,
education and health are my
Okay,
two
we
areas,
probably
and
just-
probably
just
more
say-
of that than anything else.
teacher than the years, but, yeah, since, I'm sure there's a lot of people who had you for other courses but didn't have you for PE.
Taught physiology, taught home living,
Okay.
taught history, taught math, taught reading, taught English.
Okay, well then let's, you lived here in Bingham, or in Copperton?
I do now and
Did
have
you
done.
when you were teaching?
Yes, I
Okay.
lived here.
What was it like when you were teaching here?
Probably of all the years I've taught, I enjoyed teaching at Bingham more than any other school. I taught in Granite District and in Alpine District, but I enjoyed my experience at Bingham High School more than any.
You using those notes?
No?
Okay.
Oh, I might have to.
Okay, I'll show them to you. I just didn't want to have a piece of paper.
No, okay.
I'll read them to you.
Do that.
What did you find unique about teaching here, about the town in general?
I think one of the things that made Bingham so unique was the fact that the students came from many different communities, many different nationalities, religious backgrounds, and they all melted together and made a wonderful student body. We had a lot of different kinds of students, and they all got along very well, and it was really fun.
Living and growing up in a community, I mean, looking at the students you were teaching, who had exposure to this multinational, multiracial community, how do you think that benefited them?
I think it helped them to to go out into society when there are many different nationalities. I wasn't ever reared around different nationalities when I was a child, but coming up here, it was very interesting to see all of the different cultures, and they learned to get along, and they didn't think anyone was any better than anyone else. They really meshed together as a good student body. They respected each other, their feelings for each other.
Okay. What were some of the traditions that you recall from Bingham?
I think we all, some of the traditions that I think back about, I always enjoyed the candlelight service, and I enjoyed being involved in the activities for Bee Day, because then students would whitewash the bee, and we had a lot of fun activities. But one of the things that I think I really enjoyed, I was always supervising students up in the balcony as a sophomore. As the sophomores would sit up in the balcony, and the juniors and seniors would sit downstairs in the auditorium during the assemblies. And the last assembly of the year, the seniors would move up to the stage, the juniors would move from the sides into the middle, and the sophomores like to go down and sit in the back and take their place that they would, where they would sit for the next year, and we would sing the school hymn. And it was very touching. The seniors were very emotional, and I liked sitting up in the balcony all alone. But it was a nice tradition.
Any others that you can think of?
Miss Coppertonian was always fun to have the girls compete and participate in and see their very diverse talents. The seniors, this was an activity for the seniors, and they enjoyed this very much. And they were chosen to be the yearbook queen, the Miss Coppertonian. And so I thought that was a nice tradition that Bingham always had.
Were you involved in leading any clubs or groups or anything like that?
I was involved in sports, of course, and I was supervisor of the health club and the nurses club, and I was a senior class advisor at one time, but I was able to coach the girls in basketball and volleyball and track and softball. And then as the years went on, I ended up being minor ed advisor. My principal came in one day and said, "Mrs. Peterson, your schedule has changed and you'll be minor ed advisor as of tomorrow." And I didn't know anything, and the minor eds, of course, is the pep club. And so after that, I was advisor for the pep club and did this for several years.
Well, with the activities and the clubs and the sports, what was it like working with the students? What did you learn from them? And what kind of impression did they leave upon you?
Students were very bright and very accommodating. They looked forward to the future, and they made it exciting for me to come to school each day. I look forward to working with them and helping them grow, choosing things that they wanted to do in the future, and helping them mold their lives. And so it was fun to come to school. It was fun to associate with them and to participate with them. And I have many dear friends from these students that I've taught back through the years.
Now the sports that you coach, tell me about those, and what were those experiences like, and the seasons and the ups and downs?
Girls' athletics were very different back when I was coaching than they are now. We were never allowed to participate for many years in inter-school athletics. And so the first year that we were doing this, they let us choose or pick volleyball teams, and all of the schools in the district.
I'm going to have you hold up just a moment. I'm just going to drop this there where we can't see it.
Okay.
I didn't notice that.
Okay, and we're going to start that over. That was close.
I'm wiggling, I'm sorry.
No, you're doing fine. Okay.
Watch it. You get in the frame really easy there.
Okay. Let's see. Tell me about what it was like coaching girls' athletics here.
The first year we were allowed to coach girls' athletics, we weren't allowed to have a regular schedule like the boys, but we were allowed to do volleyball. And so all of the schools were able to have tryouts for a volleyball team, and we did all of our participation in one night. We took our team, we went down to Hillcrest High School, and we played round-robin tournaments with sophomores in one tournament and varsity in another tournament, and we played from 3:30 in the afternoon, and we finished about 11 o'clock that night to work out an ultimate winner. And Bingham won the trophy the first year. We had a traveling trophy, so our names were put on it. And this is what we were able to do for several years before they allowed any participation. In basketball, they didn't allow basketball for a long time, but we would get to invite another school up, and we would participate in front of the student body one game for the year. In track, we would do also. We would have relay tournament or something like this. And our softball was also just a invitational type thing. We were allowed to play one game a year, and we'd invite a different school to come up and participate with us. And that's all we were able to do.
Through the whole time you were coaching here?
Yes, the last year before Bingham High School left Copperton and went down to South Jordan, where it's located now, we were allowed to have inter-school competition. And so in basketball, we did have participation and had inter-school competition. And the girls, most of the girls were sophomores. The seniors weren't interested in trying out for that. Most of the girls were sophomores. But as they went through and went down to the valley and participated down there, they took third in state when they were seniors. And so I was excited about this because we had started up here at Bingham, and then they finished it down there.
So, what were the girls like when you were coaching them? I mean, were they pretty enthusiastic about this? I mean, sounds like it was pretty restricted.
It was, yes, it was, but it was fun. It was exciting, and a lot of the kids liked to participate, but they weren't as dedicated to sports as they are now, and they weren't as dedicated as the boys were. This was probably more of an intramural type thing in their mind than it was. We'd have tournaments in our gym classes, and then we'd pick the best players. We'd watch them participate through a unit in our physical education, and we'd pick the best players, and these were the girls that were on the team. And we didn't have a lot of buses, or the girls didn't drive a lot in those days, and so we didn't have practices after school like the boys did. We'd practice during our gym classes and do the best we could.
Just kind of more for fun.
It was more for fun. It wasn't as bloody dog eat dog now so this nowadays.
That's competitive.
Yes, not as competitive.
What activities stand out from your experiences here at Bingham?
Activities. Well, I think of all of the sports activities. We always involved ourselves and participated and followed the boys' basketball teams, football teams. Baseball was very big here at Bingham. We always came back and they held the formal dances here in the girls' gym, and they'd decorate, and they had special dances, and everyone would come back, including the faculty, and come back and participate with the students and enjoy the dancing activities that they had here. The inter-class competition that they had on B-Day, and the seniors and the sophomores and the juniors would compete against each other, and then come up with the Spirit Trophy. And this was always a fun activity for the kids, and it would bond them together in many ways, even though it was competitive. It bonded the student body together. They were a good group of students.
How, maybe this is a biased question, but did kids receive a good education here? I mean, how were the other teachers?
The other teachers in our school were great. In each department, I think faculty members were a little bit possessive of their own department, but they received an excellent education. It was well-rounded. We all strive for academics. The students couldn't participate in pep club or anything like that unless they had good grades, passing grades, and that they were trying and putting forth good effort. And I think we had an outstanding English department, outstanding math department, science, speech. We always had tip-top participation, and our students did very well in all of the activities that they did and academically.
In the beginning, you mentioned that teaching here was probably one of the best experiences you have had in teaching. What do you think made it?
The school, when I first started teaching up here, was only about 500 or 600 students, and we had a great faculty that was very friendly, very helpful. They were willing to cooperate with one another. We had a lot of fun down in the faculty room talking. We had parties together. They were very personable, and they became your good friends, and you could talk to them. If you had a problem, you could go talk to them. The students were this way also. We didn't have many discipline problems. And it was a joy and it was a pleasure to come to work, to come to school. And I really, really enjoyed it. I left Bingham for a couple of 3 years, and then I came back, and this is where I enjoyed being and teaching the very most.
How was the school spirit pride here, between the athletic events and everything that went on? How do you think the student spirit was?
We had great school spirit here at Bingham. For several years we hadn't been to a basketball tournament, and I was in charge of the minorettes, and we finally got to go to the state tournament again, and I required the girls to go, and they said, "What's a tournament?" Some of the girls had never heard of it. "Why do we have to go in there?" And I said, "You just have to go." And I couldn't believe that they didn't know what a basketball tournament was. But after we'd gone the first night, Bingham always had better support, better following than anyone. The whole student body came, boys and girls alike, and they would sit together and they really cheered. And what made it fun was that the alumni always came back and followed Bingham. The student body was there, but the alumni was also there. And many of them came back for years and years and years and sat in the same seats and always supported and always followed the teams and helped them. And they do that today. They have a lot of good alumni support and the student body support.
Just to be kind of speculative here and maybe a little bit reflective, but when you think about a school like Bingham and being as close to it as you are, and the kind of support that it gets from its alumni and knowing what the community is like, and what does that say about the whole school in general? Let me have you think about that until this plane goes by. I mean, what do you think that says about a school when it has that kind of support?
I think the school was a very special school. It was important in everyone's life, and I think society, maybe not so much today, but in years past, the school was the center of community activity. And everyone went to the school to participate in to watch the plays and to listen to the music and to watch the ball games. And it was important in everyone's life. And it was what their lives were centered around the school activities. And it was very meaningful to them. Their best friends were there. They didn't move around as much then as they do now, and it's very important. It was very important to the students.
Do you think all schools were like that for the most part, or was there something special about Bingham? And
I've taught in different high schools, and I didn't find it in a lot of other places that we found here. Maybe because the community was way up out of the valley and it wasn't all conglomerated together. The school was up here, and this is where they had to participate, and this is where their lives were. They didn't have to drive anyplace else. I mean, they'd come over here and walk over here, and this really was the background for their social life as well as their families and their community. And I didn't find that in a lot of the other schools. I don't have that. I don't have the love for my school that I graduated from that I have for Bingham, as I have for Bingham.
what advice would you have for up-and-coming minors? I mean, just not necessarily about education, but just, the high school experience in general.
I think students need to work hard academically. It's very hard to go out into the world nowadays and to achieve and to find a place in life. I think they need to work hard academically, but I think the students, I've been disappointed the last few years with some at the school now. It's so large that They don't bond together like they did when they were smaller. They don't know everyone in the school like we used to know. And so I think they need to work for this unity again and this love of their high school and reestablish the school spirit that they used to have a few years ago. But they need to work hard academically and take pride in themselves and try to achieve in these lights and be a good citizen. We have a great country here, and they need to feel pride in themselves as well as their country and their school.
Pause for a moment.
Sure.
But it makes me sad to see it like it is.
In fact, I wanted to ask you about the building, and what are you going to miss most about this building? What was it that is going to stick out most in your mind, and why?
Well, it always was a beautiful building on the outside, and they kept the grounds great, and it added to our community. And I live up here in Copperton, and I think it added much to our community. And they took good care of it. The kids could come over and take pride in in their participation and doing what they did over here. And it was always a place, we had recreation over here. We used the football field. And I still take my grandkids up there, and we play softball and do fun things up in the stadium. And this is where the kids in town, they go up there, and it's a fun place to be. And it always looked nice. It was kind of stately here, and it was kind of a sentinel, I guess you might say.
So is there anything in the building that you always remember? Anything quirky or unusual that, like, no other building? I've never seen that anyplace else except.
Probably the thing you'd never find anyplace. We had a handball room, and as the school built, we had more students. We didn't have enough room for it. So they took the handball room, and that was my health room. They made it into a health room. They lowered the ceiling, and I have hardwood walls, and it was great. They got 3 little windows, and I was over in the corner by the boys' gym, and no one bothered me. And it was a really unique room. I also taught health in the boys' bathroom. The restroom, we didn't have room, and so I taught health in the boys' bathroom for a few years, and that was a little bit different. There was a nice ante room, and the restroom was handy, so the kids, we had our own fountain in the room, and it was kind of neat that way.
Any other unique experiences that you had here that you want to share?
I was here when they first allowed students to wear slacks. And then when they finally broke down the door and said we could wear slacks, I always felt guilty because I would have to dress in my clothes and run down to another classroom and then come back and change into my gym shorts to teach my physical education class. And then when they finally allowed slacks, the students wanted to wear denim. And I had a denim slack suit. It was a really nice dress suit. And they wouldn't let the students wear blue jeans at all. This was against the law. If you wore blue jeans, you were put in the room and your parents were called and you were sent home. And so they asked me if I wouldn't please come to the council meeting and to wear my nice slack suit to show them that you could dress and look nice in denim. And so that was a milestone in education, because after that the kids were allowed to wear slacks. But it took several years before they were ever allowed to wear Levi's to school. That was an absolute no-no.
That's interesting. We've actually heard the story a couple times today about that transition from dresses to slacks for women.
We had another interesting thing that happened. One day here a group of the senior boys came to school with their heads shaved. And Mr. Jensen, our principal, was just appalled at this, and he took these boys in and he sent them home because they were too disruptive. They couldn't have their heads shaved. They had to wait till their hair grew in before they would let them come back to school. And then a few years later, all of them were growing their hair really, really long, and the football coaches were really upset because their hair was too long, and they kicked some of the boys off the football team because their hair was too long. They wouldn't cut it another inch, so they didn't let them participate because their hair was too long. So I've gone through a lot of transitions around here.
That's probably gotta be the most extreme.
Yes.
Too short to too long. Anything else that we haven't covered that you wanted to say? Do you want to take a look at that?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. I think we've covered everything, haven't we?
We've certainly covered the questions, and I can't think of anything else to ask you.
You asked about an unusual memory. We used to have a faculty assembly every year. And I was one of those that was always right in the middle of it. And there were a group of us that tap danced. And so each year we would work up a new routine for tap dance. And one of the routines we did, we put pillowcases over our head and made hands that hung down funny, and we did a tap dance. And then the next year we did a French can-can. And we were out dancing, and the home ec teacher, Mrs. Davis, was a little bit older than some of the rest of us at that time. And so all of a sudden, right in the middle of the dance, she sat down and rested. She just said, "I'm too tired." So the rest of us finished the dance. Then we picked Joan up and we took her off the stage. And the kids liked that. They liked us making fools of ourselves. So we had a lot of fun with that.
Anything else?
Can't think of anything else.
Okay. Well, very nice job. I mean, everyone has their own kind of interesting perspective. It's the interesting part about asking everyone the same question is you get different answers for everyone. You might have to-
Elma always tap danced with me. She was the one with the skinny legs.
All right.